Welcome to Crossroads. The United States has officially designated four Antifa branches as foreign terrorist organizations. It has now finally happened. It's real, it's in paper, it's gone through. I'll be going into why this matters in today's episode. Also, meanwhile, FBI Director Kash Patel met with members of the CCP to negotiate an end to the fentanyl crisis. Will this work? Well, we'll discuss it. But he says the CCP has now agreed, at least on their part. And also, on another topic, the federal government has now revoked the commercial driver's licenses of illegal aliens who had received them in California. And guess how many they found? 17,000 people just in California who had gotten these commercial driver's licenses illegally. Be talking about these stories a lot more today. So make sure to hit the like button, leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's get started. Now look, first of all, it has finally happened. We've been talking about it for over a decade. Antifa, this alleged anti-fascist organization, which actually carries out fascist operations, is now officially designated as a foreign terrorist organization. The complicated thing with this, as people note, it's an idea, and how do you regulate an idea? They have to go after different branches of it, and the announcement made by the Department of State, it focuses on just 4 of the international branches of Antifa. And these 4 branches have been tied to murders, to violent attacks, to pretty horrific violence, actually. It also notes that additional designations of other branches could soon follow. So they are talking with different individuals in the United States. I know I've talked to some of them who are in conversations with this. They could be designating other branches of Antifa as foreign terrorist organizations or even domestic ones. Because once you get one of them, well, how does terror designations work? If you're working with others, you could also be a terrorist. Now, the Department of State says this: anarchist militants have waged terror campaigns in the United States and Europe, conspiring to undermine the foundations of Western civilization through their brutal attacks. Now, I'll briefly address one important thing, which is how do people say, well, geez, they're communists, but they're anarchists. So how does an anarcho-communist exist? Because anarchy is no government, and any government in practice that practices communism is absolute totalitarian government. So how do you support big government while also being an anarchist while supporting no government? Like, how does that even work, right? The simple answer to this is that communism in practice in government is socialism. Socialism is absolute government. It's absolute government power. It's what you call the state capitalist monopoly, meaning the government controls everything, right? That's what socialism is. Socialism is a step towards achieving communism, which is the negation of the state. It's actually designed to destroy a system. It's designed to destroy. The anarcho-communist movement believes you can achieve intentional communism through personal anarchy. So rather than, they believe you can skip the step of socialism and achieve nihilism, essentially, through personal anarchy. Meaning, an anarcho-communist will try to, within themselves, rather than within the government, try to destroy basically every structure. Destroy the family, destroy the religion, destroy culture, destroy tradition, destroy belief, destroy history, destroy all these things. And so anarcho-communists will practice a type of just absolute nihilism in order to destroy their recognition of any kind of system. And through that, they establish movements which try to achieve that in society. So they'll actually, historically, even late 1800s, early 1900s, they've always been terrorists. They were the guys who bombed Wall Street. They were carrying out large-scale terrorist attacks throughout Europe all through the early to mid-1900s. They've always been terrorists. In fact, some of the original communist terrorist organizations, most of them were anarcho-communists. It's how they operate. Current Antifa is it's a direct lineage to those anarcho-communist groups that have existed in the Western world throughout, again, late 1800s to most of the 1900s. So on this front, now they're designating Antifa, anarchist militants, as actual terrorists. This is big. The State Department says that they will designate these 4 Antifa groups as foreign terrorist organizations, and these are what they say. The first one is going to be Antifa OST. They say it's a terrorist organization based in Germany that is infamous for wielding hammers in premeditated attacks against unsuspecting victims. They say this group was named a terrorist organization by Hungary after it attacked 9 victims in Budapest. That group is also known as Hammer Antifa, and there's pretty shocking videos of their attacks. They ambush people and beat them with hammers, oftentimes severely disfiguring people by beating their heads with hammers. They've done that. Another one they say is the International Revolutionary Front. They say it's an Italy-based coalition of violent anarchists, meaning it's a bunch of organizations. They say the group claimed responsibility for the shooting of an engineering executive in Genoa and sent a series of bombs to politicians, embassies, and civilian targets, injuring several people. So just doing what the anarcho-communists have always done. In other words, bombings, threats, and otherwise. Another one they say is the Armed Proletarian Justice. They say it's a violent Greek anarchist group that pledges to wage armed conflict against police officers and state infrastructure. It says the terror group used dynamite to build a homemade bomb, then planted it near the Greek riot police headquarters in a failed attack. And the fourth is the Revolutionary Class Self-Defense. It's a violent anarchist and anti-capitalist group in Greece that claimed responsibility for improvised explosive device attacks targeting the Greek Ministry of Labor and the offices of a major railway. So here again, they've designated 4 Antifa groups, 1 in Germany, 1 in Italy, 2 in Greece. Some important history to this. The anarcho-communist ideology mainly originates in Italy. And a lot of that, in real sense, has to do with the, of course, the anti-fascist movement that, again, fascism was an Italian thing with Mussolini. A lot of the anarchist groups there went underground. They were actually fighting against the fascists. After the fascists took power, they killed most of the opposition. And basically some of it was carried on through actual anarchist clubs and groups that operated as underground societies. A lot of the ideology formed by those later came to educate and inform the other anarcho-communist groups all throughout the world. So a lot of the ideology originates in Italy. The actual group Antifa originates in Germany. Anti-fascist action, it was formed again when Hitler was trying to achieve power, and it was the anarcho-communist group Antifa, Anti-fascist action, was a front group of the Soviet Comintern. And the flag, the emblem, all the main organization stuff from modern Antifa is the same as what was used by Anti-fascist action. And then also, as things move to current times, they've named 2 organizations of Antifa in Greece. And Greece actually has some of the more extreme, terrorist branches of Antifa. These have been known. Some of the more violent branches of them, the really radical ones, they're in Greece. So they're going after these first. Now, the State Department says the Trump administration will continue to identify and disrupt Antifa's terror networks across the world. It says these terrorist designations deny violent organizations access to America's financial system and impose severe penalties on those who offer support to these militant groups. Now, why does this matter? Okay, some points on this. You have actual members of the European Union. You have actual government officials in various parts of Europe who are open members of some of these Antifa branches. And so by maintaining ties to Antifa, by being actual members of some of these now designated terrorist organizations, you have entire political parties in Europe that could be affiliated with these in various ways. This could actually designate some of the main political parties in Europe as being terrorist affiliates. That's why this is such a big deal. I'll note also the last part on this is pretty interesting because as it notes, the State Department, it says, will continue to identify Antifa terror networks and says will also work to disrupt Antifa networks internationally. So they're going after all the international branches. What does this mean in practice? Well, in practice, this is very interesting because there's a globalist network of the extreme left. I'm talking like the communist organizations. A lot of the funding that goes to like Antifa or like some of the radical communist organizations in the United States would be tied in with some of the same financial international networks as these now designated terrorist organizations. Some of the very far left in the United States even does training with some of the organizations that would be offshoots of this. And so this kind of globalist movement, like you could say it's like the new common term, the Communist International, is intertwined globally. If they begin going after these organizations, the funding networks, the people offering material support, that means that every individual tied in with it could soon face designations, going after their finances, going after their operations, going after other things. This is like they're going after the heads of an octopus, and by going after the head of the octopus, designated as a terrorist organization, all the tentacles will also be swept up in with that designation as well. That's why this matters so much. Also, I'd say just as important, this will allow the United States to take action against financial systems of these networks. So the donors, the NGOs, the big billionaires pouring money into this, they give money to all these things. This is the color revolution international system, right? The system to basically start up popular movements. And for a lot of the same people are involved there as they are here in the United States. That's again why this matters so much. Not only that, this will allow the United States to take actions against anybody who supports these networks. Because remember, what does a terrorist designation mean? Well, it means that if you provide material support to a terrorist or a group, you're a terrorist. It's a crime. It means that all the people who've given material support, and still do, to these now designated terrorist organizations are also now terrorists. That is a massive deal. Like, that is a huge deal. Now, in terms of the Antifa networks that are now officially designated as terrorists, again, they've gone after 4 of them, but again, the important part here is the financial training and organization structure that these are tied in with. Senior editor of the Post Millennial, Andy No, said this. He said, "Thank you, Secretary Rubio. The 4 Antifa groups sanctioned are so far are among the most violent in Europe." He said one of the accused terrorist members is an Italian woman, Ilaria Salis, who escaped prosecution in Hungary, where Hammer Antifa is designated as a terrorist group already. It said she escaped prosecution in Hungary by gaining diplomatic immunity by becoming a member of the European Parliament for the Greens and Left Alliance Party. And he notes Hungarian prosecutors accused her of being part of Antifa Ost/Hammerband, which jumped and beat people in Budapest with hammers. Why does that matter? Well, the problem is this woman, this Italian woman, while she escaped prosecution in Hungary, they were going to extradite her to Hungary to face criminal charges for carrying out, allegedly being involved in these attacks. This woman is a member of the European Parliament. And as I mentioned, you're dealing with, again, in Europe, a lot of the far left, like I'm talking the communist/anarchist extreme left. And in Europe, you don't really have a lot of conservative parties. You're kind of like the socialist parties, like your moderate party in a lot of Europe, right? A lot of the far left is part of the European system of politics. And a lot of the very, very, very far left in Europe is tied in with these organizations. You're going to have these groups now having to either distance themselves from it, which means also the same financial networks, which means some of the same materials, which means some of the same other things, because they're now designated as terrorist organizations. And the other big part of that is this terror designation could even impact some of the validity of political parties in Europe. And again, this is like the very far left communist system within Europe. As Andy No notes, the Greens and the Left Alliance Party within the European Parliament could be swept up in this designation. Although, again, we'll see how far they go with this. It's also possible the Trump administration just might not really do much with it, or they might go after a couple people. It's not clear how far they're going to take it, but if they want to, they can take this very far. Now, like on another topic, though, the government shutdown is now over here in the United States, and after enough Democrats, of course, broke ranks, they actually voted alongside Republicans. They passed a spending bill. That bill went to the president's desk. Trump has now signed it into action. And the White House said, signed and delivered. President Trump signs bill reopening the government and says for 43 days, Trump says, Democrats shut down the government trying to extort billions from taxpayers for illegal aliens. Today's message, they say, Republicans won't give in. Now, look, on that point, the spending bill went through. It's the one Republicans wanted. This is the bill Republicans wanted. It doesn't really give Democrats any of their demands. The big thing they wanted, free health care for everyone. And by everyone, they mean everybody, including illegal aliens. And of course, on the Trump side, that was the no-go. Republicans said, look, you're not going to give taxpayer dollars to illegal aliens. You got to have something in place. The other side, though, there are suggestions the shutdown may have actually helped Democrats win in a lot of the recent elections. Again, they shut down the government. They had elections. They said, hey, you're going to lose your SNAP benefits. Then what happens? You have record people going out to vote, like in New York, for example. Even Trump has said this publicly. The government shutdown probably helped the Democrats win some of these recent elections. But another topic, though, FBI Director Kash Patel, he met with members of the Chinese Communist Party to bring an end to the fentanyl crisis. And I'll be talking about what was actually agreed to, whether it's going to happen, after I come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. FBI Director Kash Patel met with members of the Chinese Communist Party to negotiate an end to the fentanyl crisis. And he says the Chinese Communist Party has now agreed. And he made this announcement during a White House briefing. Watch this.
As soon as the President of the United States took office, he issued a mandate to rid America of the scourge that is fentanyl, a drug that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. Thanks to his leadership and direct engagements with China, we set up a framework to execute that mission 8 months ago. A reminder here that nearly 100,000 people died of fentanyl overdoses just last year alone. Here, this year, under this president, the FBI has seized 1,900 kilograms of fentanyl so far. That is a 31% increase from the same time period last year. To put it in perspective, that's enough fentanyl to kill 127 million Americans. Fentanyl precursors are what makes up fentanyl. While we, the interagency, the Department of Justice, have been fighting hard to seize and stop drug traffickers, we must attack fentanyl precursors, the ingredients necessary to make this lethal drug. That was the sole purpose of my trip to China, to eliminate these precursors. And if successful, we would suffocate the drug trafficking organization's ability to manufacture fentanyl in places like Mexico. This was the first time an FBI director has been to China in over a decade and received the audience with his counterpart to address this matter directly. And again, thanks to President Trump's direct engagement with President Xi, the government of China committed fully to my engagement there on the ground in Beijing at a level never seen before. While at Ministry of Public Security headquarters, I met with my counterpart at MPS, where the Chinese government agreed on a plan to stop fentanyl precursors. What does that mean? The People's Republic of China has fully designated and listed all 13 precursors utilized to make fentanyl. Furthermore, they have agreed to control 7 chemical subsidiaries that are also utilized to produce this lethal drug. Effective immediately, essentially, President Trump has shut off the pipeline that creates fentanyl that kills tens of thousands of Americans. These substances are now banned, and they will no longer be utilized by the Mexican drug trafficking organizations or any other DTOs around the world to make this drug.
Now, look, I think this is a good thing. The big problem with the Chinese Communist Party is we have to see whether the CCP actually follows the agreement, because they tend not to. We're going to have to see whether or not the regime in China continues supplying other synthetic drugs and precursors, or whether the CCP just turns the flow back on after a few years, because that's kind of how they work. Now, look, among critics of the CCP, among people who watch it, and among that crowd, there's what we call the CCP model. So what is the CCP model? The CCP model is this: bring them a deal, they'll sign it, and then they'll immediately violate it. All they want you to do is agree to their terms on your end. They'll have you follow the terms of your agreement, and they won't. They will make it so you can't investigate it. They'll make it so you can't audit it. They'll make it so that they just keep things running because they know the way the Western world works. And how does the Western world work? Okay, look, let's say America makes a deal with the CCP. Maybe they'll end whatever they're doing or change the operations a bit for 6 months. We'll start seeing, hey, things worked. Great. You know, hey, look, the agreement worked. It'll be good for elections and so on. It'll be good for whatever else. It'll look good on paper. 6 months down the line, they find another way to violate it. The American system, usually it'll take a while for us to respond. We might say, hey, there's a problem again. Let's talk to our partners on this. And they'll say, well, gee, I don't know how it happened. Hands up in the air. What a coincidence. They'll begin auditing it. They'll find that, hey, this is still happening. The auditing process is going to take a year, maybe even longer. It might even take a year for them to even start that process. After that whole thing goes through, they might say, hey, there's violations. The CCP will say, hey, we'll fix it. Another 2 to 3 years goes by. And then we say, hey, you're not doing what you said you're going to do. And they say, we know, or deal with it. And then the whole process starts over again. They make another deal. They understand that the American system basically works on 4 to 8 year cycles because of our election cycle. And usually a president in place is only functional for about 3 out of 4 years because, they go into elections and so on, right? In terms of being able to bring together their cabinet, in terms of being able to make things happen, they know that's how our system works. And so they run circles around us while we do it. The problem we have with the CCP is when you make deals like this, also you need to have really strong systems to actually audit it. And the Chinese Communist Party does not really allow us to do that. The FDA in China can barely function. They keep them in little corners. In the rare chance they can actually go investigate something, a lot of it's like fake Potemkin village type stuff. There's a lot of accounts of this where investigators will go in China, they'll show up at a factory, they'll notice that nobody knows what they're doing, like the CCP just hired a bunch of actors, and they'll put on a big show, they'll leave, they'll investigate later, and they'll find that the building they inspected is empty, meaning it was fake. They do a lot of this. And so I do think it's good if they can make a deal. I do think it's good if they can find a way to bring an end to the fentanyl crisis. The big challenge they have is the CCP is very slippery. They very aggressively violate sanctions. They very aggressively violate deals. And unless they have a system in place to hold the CCP accountable if it continues to violate the deals, which it's already doing, by the way. It's already violating just about every other deal on the books. Unless they have a system to ongoing audit, keep track of, go after them, and also make sure they're not just doing other things like sending car fentanyl instead of fentanyl. Like, you regulate one drug and then they make a worse drug and send that instead. Does this also address that problem? Like, not really. And that's the problem with synthetic drugs in general. You can make a small change and it's a different designation. They need to keep an eye on all of this if we're going to have something that actually works, that requires us to also be part of the deal. Otherwise, again, it's the same old business as usual CCP model, which is they make an agreement and they violate it. And they count on us being able to never really take action to do anything about it. It's one of the reasons why it's just so hard to make a deal with the CCP. So I do hope the federal government is aware of this, and I do hope they really, really, really keep an eye on it. Now, look, on another topic, though, the federal government has now revoked the commercial driver's licenses of illegal aliens who had received them in California. And guess how many people they found? While California is saying, well, in California, it's illegal to give commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens, so obviously this is not our fault. But they gave out 17,000 of them. 17,000 people just in California who had gotten illegal CDLs, commercial driver's licenses. The U.S. Department of Transportation says this. U.S. Secretary of Transportation Sean P. Duffy announced today that the California Department of Motor Vehicles has admitted to illegally issuing 17,000 non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses to dangerous foreign drivers, like people who can't read English or recognize basic road signs and make illegal U-turns on freeways and then have, people crashing into them and just murdering Americans and killing entire families. But they say this, thanks to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's ongoing audit, each of these licenses is being revoked. So they've now, it says here, notices have been issued to these 17,000 non-domiciled CDL holders that their licenses are no longer meets federal requirements and will expire in 60 days. Now, why are they letting them continue to use them for 60? To ask my personal opinion, it's because this is kind of how the game is played. Look, if you have 17,000 truck drivers and they're working in the United States, and you have a lot of the shipping that depends on that, especially we're already going into December pretty soon in the holiday season. You're going to have people buying Christmas presents. You're going to have a lot of shipments. This pushes it 3 months out, right? 2 months out. So just after Christmas, this will come to an end. This means that the shipping companies, all the trucking companies, are going to have to hire 17,000 more people. I mean, assuming that these 17,000 people are actively doing it. We would assume some of them are not actively working, so it might be like other jobs, where, maybe they're not active, right? This means basically it's going to give the companies that hire these people time to replace them. And because this is one of the problems we face as a country with mass illegal immigration. People say, look, we need all these foreign workers. A lot of unions and Americans say, no, you don't. You need to hire us and maybe pay us a little more money. But if you're going to make it so you're starting to deport or fire people, you can't do it all at once because basically it's pulling out too large of a system. You need to give the body time to replace what is being taken out. And if they're going to revoke 17,000 commercial driver's licenses, you need to give the companies time to replace it, which again is why I assume they're giving them 60 days. Because some people would say, well, geez, how many Americans are going to get killed by bad drivers in 60 days? I don't know. But it says this, CSA requires California to provide its full audit of all its non-domiciled CDLs so the agency can verify that every illegally issued license has been revoked and that the failures that allow these licenses to be issued are corrected, suggesting it may be even more than 17,000. Alongside this revocation, they're going to carry out an audit of the system. Now, California, what do they have? Well, they have sanctuary policies. What does that mean? It means that the government in California restricts federal government employees in the state from cooperating with federal authorities. Now, how does that work with federally regulated programs like for commercial driver's licenses? Well, I don't know. We'll find out. But California might try to fight this. They probably will try to fight it because they're not going to want to provide all this audit information. Because aside from revealing like illegally issued driver's license or commercial driver's licenses, it could also be exposing the identities of illegal aliens who've been defrauding the United States. Now, it also says this, though. CSA's nationwide non-domiciled CDL audit uncovered systemic policy, procedural and programming errors in California's non-domiciled CDL program, which allowed thousands of CDLs to be issued to foreign drivers. Now remember, this is not even just illegal aliens, it's even just non-American citizens who weren't supposed to be having this. It says the audit also found that more than 1 in 4 of the non-domiciled CDL records sampled in California failed to comply with federal regulations. That's a lot of them. 1 out of 4. They say this includes issuing licenses that extended well beyond a foreigner's work permit, meaning, hey, I got a visa. Hey, my visa expired. Hey, I'm going to continue getting this program illegally even though my visa has expired. That's how the game was working. Now, on another topic, though, after taking some key victories in the recent elections, the Democratic Socialists of America is now allegedly planning to run candidates for school boards because they took over, some of the mayor's offices. Now they want the school boards. Now, Town Hall says this. The Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, have made it very clear they intend to take over American politics and turn the greatest nation in the world into another cesspool of communism. Because again, socialism is just communism practiced in government. That's all socialism is, right? There's no difference. In fact, socialism and communism were used interchangeably until the Bolshevik Revolution. Until the Bolshevik Revolution, socialism and communism were the same thing. I don't know why people think they're different these days. There's no difference. The only technical definition is that when you bring communism into practice in government, it's called socialism. The Soviet Union was a socialist government. The Chinese Communist Party is a socialist government. In fact, they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. They're a socialist government. The Cuban regime is a socialist government. Every communist who runs for office calls himself a socialist. This includes the current ones and the old ones. If you bring communism into practice in government, it is always, always, always called socialism. And it's time that we start recognizing the actual meaning of it, because technically that's illegal in the United States. And we just don't enforce the law on it, right? But it says this. They used Zoran Mondami's candidacy in New York City as a springboard to launch campaigns nationwide. They lost the mayor's race in Minneapolis, but DSA candidates now comprise the majority of the city council. Meaning, the Democratic Socialists of America has found out that, hey, they can take over the Democratic Party from within. A lot of the Democrat Party, old guard, they don't like it one bit. But it says this. Several Democratic Party Senate candidates now espouse the DSA policies on health care, education, and Israel, because they're very anti-Israel also. It says, but all politics is local, and the DSA knows this. That's why they're running candidates for local school boards, including in Oregon. Now, my take, this is a pretty big deal, because you might remember what happened over the last 5 years, right? When Biden was president, a lot of the conservative groups in the United States, like Moms for Liberty and stuff, a lot of them were working on the grassroots. They were saying, okay, look, we lost power at the federal level. We need to focus on the grassroots. The Biden time in office woke up the conservative grassroots. The conservatives are now kind of having a civil war with each other right now, right? But while they're having a civil war, DSA is taking over the Democrat Party. And DSA, because the role they used to play was basically this. DSA is the grassroots of the Democrat Party, which is why even though a lot of the Democrats do not support socialism, and I'm saying this based on voting, a lot of them have openly voted against socialism, a lot of them have, even though they don't like it for the most part, even though you have a lot of them even saying they're not going to rerun for office because they don't like what's happening with DSA, they've kind of had an alliance with DSA. Democratic Socialist America is technically a third party, but they run under the Democrat ticket. And so they're actually a different political party, but they use Democrats as their vehicle. For a long time, they've been the grassroots. They're the get out the vote drives. They're the voter registration groups of the Democrat Party. They're the protesters. They're the rioters. They're the big issues that kind of get people, motivated to vote. And what they've basically done is use that time to build up all the infrastructure. And now they're launching an operation to basically say, hey, this is our party now. And they're kind of trying to push the Democrats out. They've kind of sprung a trap, in other words, where they were allowed to build up the entire base of the Democrat Party. Again, voter registration drives, the whole 9 yards. And they're now saying basically, we are now the Democrat Party. And they're springing this now, and they're trying to take over all the elections. Now, on that front, what does it mean if they control the grassroots? It means that they can, if they want to run a candidate, they have the voter registration. They have the emails of people. They have the grassroots organizations that work on all the popular issues. They control the messaging. They control the people going out and doing all the on-the-ground campaigns. They control the entire grassroots. And if they just flip the grassroots, that means that they control a lot of the get-out-the-vote stuff. They control the topics. They control the issues. And because the Democrats handed it to them for so long, there's not a lot the Democrats can do about it, even though I think a lot of them don't like this. DSA is now basically running their candidates under the Democrat ticket. And if they can win even in very small margins, then they have their candidates under the Democrat ticket, which is what happened in New York, by the way. And they basically run the party. It's their party now if they succeed in doing this. And they're also now trying to take over the smaller elections, meaning, of course, that you're going to start seeing a lot of DSA policies moving up through the system. It's not going to be like at the presidential level, probably at least not for a while, unless I don't think they're going to try it for the next election, even though there's some who are trying. You are going to start seeing it within the grassroots, which is the narrative system, which is going to be the media, which is going to be the topics and the issues. And that's what we're now seeing kind of boil to the surface. Now, look, on another topic, a federal judge has given orders to force ICE to release all illegal aliens being detained in Chicago. And you might be saying, well, how do they do that? We'll see if they can legally do it, but here's what's happening, right? Newsmax says this: a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to release hundreds of people detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Protection in the Chicago area by noon on Friday last week, citing growing constitutional and public health concerns. And it says this: U.S. District Judge Jeffrey Cummings issued the directive Wednesday demanding an immediate plan to free detainees apprehended as part of Operation Midway Blitz and held in facilities across northern Illinois and neighboring states, meaning, even ruling outside of the state. And they say this, the judge wrote, the government cannot continue to hold these individuals under conditions that violate their constitutional rights. The time for delay has passed. And notes the ruling follows months of mounting pressure from immigrant rights advocates who say overcrowded detention centers pose grave risks to both detainees and staff. Attorneys representing the detainees argue that unsafe and unsanitary conditions amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. Now, let me explain how this works. The system, there's an entire system around this, right? You have news organizations tied in with it. You have legal representation, like attorneys groups tied in with it. You have NGOs and grassroots organizations tied in with it that kind of work as the diaspora of this. And you have a lot of activist judges who are part of this as well. Maybe got money from some of the same individuals pouring money into the political campaigns of the judges or DAs, pouring money into the grassroots, the NGOs, pouring money into the legal organizations, and pouring money into the media. And sometimes even pouring money into the political campaigns of politicians in these areas. So if you control all of this, if you've gotten people into these positions by pouring money into campaigns, pouring money into donations, pouring money into news organizations, pouring money into legal funds, what does it mean? It means you can puppeteer things and change politics, right? So, if you have an individual who has an anti-ICE agenda, a billionaire, for example, who wants to finance all of this, they can puppeteer it and play games. And what do? Well, the first step is you have, of course, news organizations write fake articles or half-true articles. And what they'll do is they'll go and interview people. Hey, I spoke to a guy at an ICE facility who said there were unsanitary conditions. The food isn't good enough. They're making us drink out of toilets. Remember those articles? The truth is they have like sinks connected to the back of it because it's the same water supply. It's clean water, but it's how the facilities work. Overcrowding, it's too hot, it's too cold, all these things. They have the media write fake articles. Then, after the media write fake articles, the NGOs publish reports using the media articles as the, citing sources to generate reports claiming there's violations. Then you have lawyers take the report from the NGO and file lawsuits representing, these rights organizations. Then you have the lawsuits go to the activist judges because they do judge shopping in a lot of cases. And the activist judges then use, again, the legal cases pulling from the NGO reports, pulling from the fake news articles. But again, it's the fake parts have been basically laundered through the information system into these reports. And they then use these as arguments to say nationwide injunction policies, and they put federal government policy on hold. That's how these things work. These are very common operations, in the United States, very common way of doing things. I'm not saying the judge here is doing this, but I am saying I know the basis of a lot of these arguments. And a lot of the basis of the arguments is rooted in half-truths and false information, right? And I know how this is how the system works. This is how the game is played. This is how the activist system in the United States does its magic, and this is how they basically do whatever they want. Again, there's a system in place in the United States, funded oftentimes by the same individuals, that puppeteers movements like this and does things like it. Again, I'm not accusing this judge in particular of this, but I am saying this is a broader issue in the United States, and that's typically how it works. Now, like on another topic, though, the government shutdown is now over, as I briefly mentioned, but the brief cutoff of federal funding could actually have a lasting impact, especially on SNAP, that's food stamps. And one of the latest findings has shown, well, there's even more fraud than we first believed. U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins has revealed that deceased people, dead people, were getting SNAP benefits. And she announced this during an interview on Fox News on the Ingram Angle. Watch this.
On day one, back in February, for me, we sent a letter to every governor saying, send us your SNAP data. All of this money that the federal government, the taxpayers are paying for food stamps, we don't even know where it goes, what happens, what they're doing with it. And we said no more. So 29 states complied and 20 plus others did not. And we're in litigation right now. But of the 29 that complied, what we have found is staggering. 500,000 people getting benefits 2 times under the same name. 5,000 dead people. 80% of the able-bodied Americans, meaning they can work, they don't have small children at home, they're not taking care of an elderly parent, they can work and they choose not to work, of course, because they're getting significant benefits from the taxpayer. So this light, Laura, that has now been shined on what is perhaps one of the most corrupt, dysfunctional programs in American history, that we are working now. Very big announcements coming next week on this. We are cracking down. We now have a plan to fix it, and we're really, really excited about doing that for the American people.
Now, like, that's a really big deal. 500,000 people getting benefits 2 times under the same name. 5,000 dead people getting SNAP benefits. It's actually more than that they've even found now. A huge percentage of able-bodied people who can work and just plain old don't feel like doing it, still getting SNAP. Basically, they've uncovered just massive, massive fraud within the food stamps program. And now, like, at least the USDA, they seem to have a plan to fix this. We're going to have to wait and see what that entails and, when they make the announcement on it. But again, massive fraud being encountered in the SNAP program. I'll say that SNAP is dead. Long live SNAP, because it's still going to be there, but it's not going to be the same. You're probably going to see a lot of people get booted off of it. Now, look, also, before we jump into questions, our new documentary, that is Truth Under Fire, The Framing of Charlie Kirk, that comes out in just a couple days, November 19th. That's this Wednesday. It's going to be completely free to watch. All you have to do to watch it, register on Epoch TV, epochtv.com. It's been a lot of work putting this together. I interviewed a lot of great people, and I think it's going to have a good impact, actually. Part of what I want to do with this documentary is kind of set right the legacy of Charlie Kirk. Because, look, believe what you want, I think Charlie Kirk's legacy is being dragged through the mud right now. I don't think this is what he represented. You kind of have a civil war among conservatives. I want to really talk about what Charlie Kirk was, what he represented, what he stood for, the effect he had on this country, the effect he's still having on this country, especially among young people, and also to expose the system of hit pieces, how people are being framed, how people are being maligned, and how there is a system in place intentionally doing that. Now, the link to watch this new documentary is in the description below, and let me show you the trailer for the documentary, then we'll jump into some questions. How was Charlie Kirk framed by the narrative system?
An anti-Semite, as a purveyor of misinformation, as being someone on what they call the hard right.
He's been slandered and lied about by people on the left.
They want to create an atmosphere of fear where I'll stop doing what I'm doing because I'm worried that I'm going to get murdered.
Charlie Kirk was shot down on a college campus, not with a weapon in his hand, but with a microphone.
What kind of threats did Charlie face, and did he ever confide in you about these?
He would say, this is a dark time spiritually, pray for me.
All right, now important also, when we premiere this, I'm also going to be doing an additional episode that day. We'll be doing a special live Q&A where we can come and chat about the documentary. That's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern Time on premiere day, which is again this Wednesday. So I'll see you all there. We're still going to do the normal morning show, so join me then. And then join me as well at night, the same day on Wednesday, for the special live Q&A after the premiere of the documentary. Link in the description as well. And that's it. Let's jump into some questions. All right. First off, let's see here. First question, Ashley from California is saying, how many of these communist groups get financial support from the CCP? Yet you don't see these kinds of groups causing chaos in the mainland, just Western countries. Guess those groups are okay with slave labor and organ harvesting. Yeah, spot on, right? I mean, which is what surprises me too. And look, I do a lot of like radio interviews and TV interviews. I mean, I probably do like 5 minimum a week. Like I do them all the time. And I brought this up, right? You have a lot of people who complain about things, internationally. How dare America do this? When you have the Chinese Communist Party carrying out current day slave labor, let's just talk about that. If the NBA cared so much about slavery, where they want to, denounce the United States and let people kneel on the court and everything else, why do they work with the Chinese Communist Party? Good question, right? If they allow players to kneel on the court and kneel during the Pledge of kneel during the national anthem and so on, how dare America have had slaves 100 years ago? Right? They make a big, or more than that, they make a big deal about that. But then they, of course, work with the Chinese Communist Party, and they even punish players who criticize current day slavery in China. The simple answer to this is they don't care about the actual issue. They don't care about slavery. This is just anti-American stuff. It's just politics, and it's about money. They make money in China, and we let them do it here, and the CCP does not let them do it. Right? It's about money, as far as I'm concerned. Same thing with organ harvesting. We can all talk about, stop genocide and all this stuff, which, great, stop genocide. But you have a lot of these same businesses, same organizations, same financial institutions, same media working with the Chinese Communist Party while the Chinese Communist Party is carrying out full-scale genocide, murdering people for their organs. Some of the more horrifying reports coming out now, the CCP is using persecuted religious dissidents like Falun Gong practitioners, like women, as surrogates to have forceful impregnation, and they're using the infants for organ harvesting. Like, what is wrong with the world that is happening and nobody even talks about it? Like, how many media have you seen even talk about this, let alone denounce it? How many major figures talking about all the problems in the world who've even dared talk about this in China? Why do we talk about it everywhere else but not in China when the CCP is the biggest violator of human rights on the entire face of the planet? Why do we not talk about that? The simple answer is money. The simple answer is you have a lot of people padding their pockets and they don't dare call out the CCP even though it goes against everything they claim to believe in. Meaning what they believe in means nothing. Meaning they're lying to you. Meaning they stand for nothing. Meaning that money means more to them than the issues they claim to represent. That is the simple answer for it. So I do think, even with these communist organizations, look, how many people has communism killed? What are we at? If you go by the Black Book of Communism, you're looking at which was a Harvard book in its original form. You're looking at about 100 million people killed by communism. A lot of the estimates in the Black Book of Communism are older. Current estimates put it closer to 150 million. But again, a lot of these academics don't even talk about it because a lot of them believe in it. And hey, maybe you have to break 150 million eggs to make an omelet, right? Or not make an omelet. But you got to keep doing it, or maybe you'll get it right next time, right? At some point, you got to recognize you guys still haven't made an omelet, and you broke a lot of eggs. And you know what? Not trying to undermine it, you know what I mean? But this greatest cause of human misery continues to operate, and the world needs to let it go. The world needs to bring an end to this, seriously. I think if we don't universally condemn this, and the CCP is the ringleader of all of it right now, if we don't bring an end to this, the basic moral compass of the world will be lost. And I think we're already seeing that happen. We're already seeing people, paying lip service to human rights and paying lip service against genocide and paying lip service against the history of torture and the history of slavery, and do nothing and say nothing and openly do business with and even profit from the same types of abuses they claim to be against. And in my opinion, it means absolutely nothing until they stand up and call it out. That includes religious suppression. That includes suppression of freedom of speech. If America no longer represents these things, if money means more to us than this, then what are we as a country? I hope that they universally call it out, and I hope the whole world speaks out against the CCP on that front. Kristen Cass 1, you're saying, why do our government officials continue to make deals with the CCP when we know the CCP will not abide by the agreement? Without American money, the CCP would have collapsed, just like every other communist regime decades ago. Yeah, I had a debate on this recently. What was it? Someone brought up Cuba. Because, the big argument among a lot of the communists is that Cuba would be a great country if it were not for U.S. sanctions. If America did business with Cuba, then Cuba would work. Okay, so what you're saying is that for communism to work, it needs to engage in capitalism. So communism works if it can practice capitalism, because that's what trade with America would represent, right? And if you cut off capitalism, communism fails. Like, when do you do like the 1 + 1 = 2 equation? Where, you know what I mean? Like, when do you put two things together and realize the natural outcome of those factors? That if you remove the ability of communism to engage in capitalism, it fails. That if you disconnect a communist regime from Western business and Western investment, it fails. That if you make it so that a broad social welfare system cannot feed off of the capitalists, then it results in poverty and it fails. At what point do we say that 1 + 1 = 2 and recognize that communism does not work? I don't know. I would also say, at what point do we, Kristen Cass 1 notes that, making a deal with the CCP, they don't follow it, right? Let's put it this way. How many of you know somebody in your life who, if they ask you for money, will not pay you back? Or if you make a deal with them, they're just going to violate it? How many of you have known someone like that in the past? That you've saying, okay, every time I give you money, you never give it back to me, buddy. Maybe if I give you money next time, you're also not going to give it back to me, because that's what every previous experience has shown. Maybe if you, make a deal with me, like let's say you want to get involved in a business partnership, right? And the guy coming to you with the greatest business deal ever has ripped you off like 5 times already. Makes a deal, violates it, doesn't work, whole 9 yards. If that person comes up to you and says, hey, I got a great idea for another deal, you got to get in with me on it, will you believe that person? If the answer is yes, look, best luck to you. Okay, the world has good people who are gullible, okay? But at some point, you got to have pattern recognition. You got to recognize that if every previous experience has led to this outcome, maybe I should stop doing it. Okay? Look, I'm trying to give some therapy here. Sometimes you got to break a cycle. If you're in an abusive cycle, you know what? There's ways to get help, and please get out of it. Okay? America is in an abusive cycle with the Chinese Communist Party. They continue to try to, make deals with us. They openly state they want to destroy us. They openly state that drugs are part of the drug warfare plan against the United States. They openly state that the world, the communist system there, cannot coexist on the same planet with the United States. They openly support every enemy against us. They openly launder the money for the drug cartels through their state-run banks. They openly work with every totalitarian regime, including, as they make this deal, ironically, with Venezuela, where we're trying to fight the drug cartels there. They've openly supplied fentanyl, other synthetic drugs, and precursor chemicals for things like methamphetamine to the cartels for decades. They do this. In fact, I've been reporting on it for over a decade. In fact, I was one of the first journalists to really, I'm not the first, but among the first to expose this. We know they do it. We know they have done it. We know they will continue to do it. So why do we keep making deals believing they're not going to do it? Look, you tell me, okay? I don't know why they don't recognize that this is probably not going to work, okay? I hope that one day they do, but I don't think it's going to work because every previous experience has shown it does not. And at some point, America needs to get out of this unhealthy relationship, okay? You know, if this was your friend, you'd have an intervention. You'd be worried about them. And hopefully the day will come when that friend realizes, you know what, I need to break the cycle. I need to stop seeing this person. And the CCP says, hey, I'm different this time. You know, you got to tell that friend they got to break the cycle, okay? Another question, Martin McKenzie, you're saying, I keep telling my daughter, socialism is communism. She won't believe me. Okay, good question to ask. Which communist government came to power and did not call its system of government socialism? Can we name any? Another thing to do, if your daughter can recognize, has there ever been a communist government? Ask her that. Does that communist government refer to itself as socialist or communist? The simple answer is this. And I've heard this from a lot of people who've fled communism. If you talk to Cubans who fled communism, they'll be like, yeah, Castro said that he was a socialist, not a communist. You know, Maduro said he's a socialist. Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung said he was a socialist. Said they're a communist and they're going to bring socialism. The Chinese Communist Party, the actual name of it, says that their system of government is socialism with Chinese characteristics. Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution, the establishment of the Soviet Union, after coming into power, said, how can we advance to capitalism if we fear the stage of socialism? They were all socialists. Because the simple answer is communism is the carrot at the end of the stick. Hey, destroy everything and you might get something interesting. You got to pass it to find out what's in it because you can't understand what communism will be until you do it, which is destroy everything, destroy religion, destroy morality, destroy tradition, it's the negation of systems. If you want to go by the actual term, they call it the negation of the negation. Right? That's what it is. It's about destroying. And that's why every time they take power, what do? They hold a cultural revolution and they attack religion and they persecute religion and they persecute belief and outlaw freedom of speech and the whole 9 yards, and they keep doing it. And people keep saying, well, that wasn't real communism. Well, why wasn't it real communism? It's because it does not achieve what it claims it's going to achieve. It just creates misery. If you were to ask me, that's what it's designed to do, but people believe it's something it's not. They believe it's going to do something other than what it has done every single time in observable history, okay? America, the entire world has been experimenting with communism for well over 100 years, and it has never produced anything other than misery and destruction, ever, okay? At what point do we recognize that? Unfortunately, you have a lot of them who still believe in it because they think it's about sharing. Putting a gun to somebody's head and stealing their stuff is not sharing, right? If you want to talk about sharing, I'd say that's closer to like traditional values and just, in the past there were a lot of systems to facilitate or encourage, generosity and stuff like that. That's not communism. Communism is the forced redistribution where you murder somebody for their stuff and then redistribute it. And usually take about 90% for yourself, right? That's usually what it is. Until there's nothing left to steal and the system collapses. And then all the communists say, well, it failed because they were denied business with the capitalist systems. They never learn a lesson and they continue to believe in it. It's very unfortunate, actually. But I will also say that, part of the problem we have is that's what they're being taught in school. They're not being taught real history. They're not being taught anything. And maybe part of it is because the communists are taking over the schools. Maybe we need to address this at some point. Vera Lowles, you're saying Marx's view on socialist revolution was as follows. It could take place only in all developed capitalist societies of Europe simultaneously. Lenin revised Marx, and everyone saw what happened. Yeah, and so that's true. So Marx believed that communism could only be accomplished if everybody does it. Why does that work? It's because Marx's view of communism is it was designed to destroy civilization. That is the simple answer. Communism is the negation of systems. It pulls from the Hegelian dialectical theory, which is, what do they call it? The negation of the negation. The negation of the existing institution, right? And so they believe that when you destroy everything that was created by mankind, that represented that came from a person influenced by a belief in God, right? If you want to really get into what communism was, it was a war against God. They believe first you need to destroy a person's recognition of faith. Then when you create the communist man, the product of that person's production will be communist. They will produce things in the image of man, not influenced by tradition, history, culture, family values, moral values, belief, or anything else. And so the communist system, once it takes powers, will need to destroy all those things in order to create the communist man. And then when that person inevitably destroys civilization, the resulting construction will be the new communist state, right? That is the argument. Communism is not made to produce anything. It is made to destroy. The reality of this, what does that look like? It looks like a person totally divorced from morality. That's what it looks like. If you want to get into like the real ideological side of it, a lot of them were what you call naturists, right? If you go back to the French Revolution, they were what you call naturists, Luciferians, right? Where they believe that all things are good. Anything that emerges from human nature, because man is an animal, as they say, I don't believe that, but as they say, that is human nature, and if everything of human nature is good, then what is evil? It means that anything that restricts human nature is evil. In other words, evil is good and good is evil in their belief. So if you have an urge to commit murder, if you have a sexual urge, if you have an urge to steal, if you have an urge for anything, well, that's human nature. And the communist would say that's of human nature. Indulge freely. Do as thou wilt. Whereas, what do they say is evil? Well, they say if you criticize it, that is evil. If you have moral systems that prevent it, that is evil. In their eyes, the moral systems, the family values, the systems of tradition that would restrict human urge is what is evil, which is why they try to destroy it. That is, if you want to get into the basics of what all this is, that's what it is. It's an inversion of good and evil. It's a flipping upside down of everything. If you want to go to the early communists, or so they called the communism and socialism was used as the same thing up until about 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution. Go to the first communist, they call him the Rousseau of the gutter. He was in the Cercle Social, the Society of the Friends of Truth in the French Revolution. The Rousseau of the gutter, what was he? He was the most sick, twisted individual you would ever read. I've read his stuff. I felt I needed to wash my eyeballs with soap afterwards because it was so disgusting. He was obsessed with incest, and he wanted to create a society based on a brothel. And he had a worldview where he basically had a metaphysical view of understanding the world based on animal sexuality. He was one of the most sick, twisted people you will ever read, and he's the first communist, okay? The Rousseau of the gutter. Because all it is, again, is a flipping upside down of good and evil. That if you believe in human restraint, you're evil. And which is why I'd say communism, what does it always do? What is regarded as evil by a lot of the current communists? If you disagree with them, they say that's evil. If you disagree with their sexual choices, or you disagree with them being able to rob and steal and not go to jail for it, then they call you a fascist. They call you evil because they regard human morality, restraint, and belief in God as things that restrict whatever the heck they want to do. And that's their understanding of right and wrong. That's how they understand it. That is the Marxist view. That is, if you want to get rid of all the stupid narratives and the big talk, that is all it is. That is what true Marxism is. And again, that's, I'd say, what it has done to people. If you look at the kinds of people it produces, that is the kind of person it produces. That's all it is. All right, that said, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, for another great discussion. That said, please don't forget to share this episode, and don't forget we also have my new documentary coming out on Wednesday. So join me for the premiere of that. Again, it's Truth Under Fire, the framing of Charlie Kirk. It's going to be great. I hope you all enjoy it. And join me afterwards also for a live Q&A. I will see you then. Thank you so much. Link in the description. Join me again tomorrow and I'll see you then. Thank you so much. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.